Breaking news. I wanted to share this social media post from Fox News stating that a U.S. fighter jet shoots down unmanned Iranian drone that was approaching USS
Amid already heightened tensions, today, military escalations with Iran. The American aircraft carrier USS...
In another worrying sign that the U.S. could get pulled into a potential wider conflict across the region, U.S. officials tonight say a Navy warship in the Red Sea intercepted and shut down several missiles and drones.
3:14 a.m. Arabian Sea. Right now, a carrier strike group is running dark, waves slapping steel like a slow heartbeat. Sailors below decks feel the ship flex with every swell, unaware that the sky is already filling up with machines. 300 drones, low, cheap, and relentless. And what happens next isn't a battle in the traditional sense. It's a calculated demonstration, one that turns a swarm into a warning the entire region can hear. The horizon looks calm at first, just a thin seam of moonlight on black water. Then, the first sign arrives the way modern war always arrives, not with a boom, but with data. A faint tickle on an operator's screen, a ripple in the electromagnetic spectrum, a satellite pass that sees heat where there should be none, and then confirmation. Multiple launches, multiple vectors, the kind of number that makes seasoned watch officers sit up straighter, because numbers like this aren't meant to damage. They're meant to overwhelm. You're standing on the carrier's island now. Imagine it. Wind tearing at your clothes, the smell of jet fuel and salt. The deck lights are dimmed to pinpoints. Somewhere in the dark, an F/A-18 sits chained down like a predator on a leash. And in the Combat Information Center, the voice you never want to hear cracks over the net. Vampires, multiple. Repeat, multiple inbound. Count. Climbing. Not 10, not 30, 300. This is where the story splits into two realities: what Iran thinks is about to happen, and what the U.S. already prepared to do. Because the terrifying thing the U.S. unleashes isn't a single missile. It's a system, a hunt. The Arabian Sea matters for reasons that don't fit on a headline. To the north, the Strait of Hormuz, a choke point through which a massive share of global oil shipments still move. To the west, bases like Al Udeid in Qatar and Al Dhafra in the UAE provide air power and surveillance that can reach deep into the region. And out here, miles from any coastline, sits the center of gravity, a U.S. Navy carrier strike group. In this fictional scenario, the strike group is anchored around a Nimitz-class carrier, screened by two Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and a Ticonderoga-class cruiser. Underwater, at least one attack submarine prowls, silent, patient, invisible. Above, a rotating combat air patrol, F/A-18E/F Super Hornets, circles like sharks in the dark. Somewhere farther out, an E-2D Hawkeye is painting the sky, turning clouds into coordinates. Thousands of sailors, hundreds of systems, millions of moving parts. And one job: survive anything the region can throw at it. Now, zoom out. Imagine you're not on the ship. You're in a dimly lit room far inland, an Iranian command node buried under concrete, screens glowing with maps of sea lanes and predicted U.S. patrol routes. The planners there know something every modern military knows. You don't have to sink a carrier to win an information war. You just have to make it look vulnerable. They're not chasing a Hollywood kill shot. They're chasing a moment. A flaming drone slamming into a flight deck, a fireball filmed by someone's phone, a headline that reads, "U.S. Carrier Hit." That's the strategic calculation, not conquest, narrative. And to manufacture that narrative, they bet on the oldest trick in warfare: saturation. 300 drones launched in waves at multiple altitudes from multiple bearings. Some are decoys with loud radar signatures. Some are low and slow, hugging the sea like insects. Some carry small warheads. Some carry cameras. A few carry electronic warfare payloads designed to blind radar just long enough for a handful to slip through. If you're Iran's planner, you're smiling right now, because you believe you've finally found the lever. A carrier group can shoot down missiles, but can it shoot down hundreds of targets at once? Can it keep up with the math? And for a few minutes, on their screens, it looks like the answer might be no. The tracks multiply, the swarm spreads, and then the fatal flaw reveals itself. Because there's a problem with their plan. It assumes the US will fight this like it's 2003, reactive, linear, one target at a time. But that's not how the carrier strike group sees the world anymore. Not in 2026. Not after years of watching cheap drones rewrite battlefields. What Iran didn't account for is the integrated kill chain, space to sea to air, already waiting for exactly this moment. They didn't account for the US treating drones not as aircraft, but as prey in a networked hunt. They didn't account for information dominance, and they definitely didn't account for what happens when the US decides to stop intercepting and start erasing the swarm at the source. So here's the question you should be asking. If you were the one who pressed launch on 300 drones, how sure would you be that you'd get even 30 through? Because that's the difference between a headline and a humiliation. The first warning doesn't come from a ship. It comes from above the planet. In this fictional scenario, US early warning satellites detect launch heat signatures within seconds. Small, scattered, but unmistakable. That data gets fused into theater networks. The track picture begins forming long before the drones even reach the coastline. Minute 0. In the carrier's Combat Information Center, consoles glow red and blue. Operators talk fast but controlled, trained voices, no wasted words. Aegis radar begins to sweep. The E-2D Hawkeye pushes a broader view, turning the sky into a grid. Multiple low RCS contacts, bearing 047 to 132, range decreasing. Now you're here in the CIC. The air is cold, recycled. It smells like electronics and coffee that's been reheated too many times. Your heart is doing that thing, fast but steady, because you can feel the weight of every track on the screen. This is not a drill, not a test, a real swarm. The alert cascades. Destroyers go to general quarters, hatches seal, fire control teams lock in, flight deck crews clear the surface. The carrier turns slightly into the wind, not for flight ops, but to optimize radar and defensive arcs. And in the darkness above the ocean, Super Hornets are already moving. Because the first layer of defense is not metal. It's time. If you can kill the swarm early, far enough out, you don't have to fight it near your ship. That's the logic, and the US executes it like a machine. The engagement begins at range. The E-2D Hawkeye, with its rotating radar dome, picks up the leading edge of the swarm. The tracks look wrong. Too many, too chaotic, too cheap, like someone spilled a jar of insects across the sky. Fighters get vectored. Cap flight, push Angels 1-5, steer 310. You have multiple groups, low altitude. You're in that cockpit now. Imagine it. Night vision turning the world into green shadows. The jet hums like a living thing. Your radar scope is dense with returns, and you realize something. You are not hunting a plane. You are harvesting targets. The first Super Hornet fires an AIM-120 AMRAAM at a drone that's actually a decoy. Big signature, easy kill. The missile hits, and the decoy disappears into a flash, but the pilot doesn't celebrate. He doesn't even breathe differently, because he knows the decoy did its job. It forced a shot. This is what saturation is meant to do. Burn your magazine. But the US isn't playing that game the old way. Instead of spending expensive missiles on every drone, the fighters shift tactics. They go guns. They go short range. They go directed engagements, picking off drones that threaten the formation, not wasting shots on the loud ones designed to distract. At the same time, the ships begin their own work. Aegis does what Aegis was built to do: track many targets simultaneously, assign fire control solutions, and manage the geometry of survival. The first SM-2 launches from a destroyer with a violent white flame. The missile climbs, arcs, and then dives into the swarm's leading edge, detonating in a proximity burst that shreds multiple drones in a single bloom of sparks. That's the terrifying part most people don't understand about modern air defense. You don't have to hit every target directly. Sometimes you detonate near them and let physics do the rest. Minute 4. The swarm is still massive, but it's bleeding. Now watch the numbers, because numbers are the story here. This is a timeline, because timelines reveal the truth. Minute 4. The outermost wave begins to collapse. Roughly 40 drones destroyed at long range. Minute 7. Fighters and ship missiles combine to eliminate another 60. Minute 10. The swarm splits. Some drones go high to draw radar, others go sea skimming to hide. And this is where it gets dangerous. Sea skimmers are hard. The horizon hides them. The ocean clutters radar. You don't see them until they're close enough to feel. And Iran's planners are counting on that. They believed the ocean would be their camouflage. But the US brought a different kind of vision. Not just radar, electronic support measures, infrared search and track, passive sensors listening for tiny engine signatures, distributed sensors across multiple platforms sharing a common picture. System integration. This isn't a single ship defending itself. This is an entire network deciding who lives. Minute 12. The first truly tight moment arrives. A cluster of drones, maybe 25, drops to extremely low altitude, racing over the water. They are now inside the range where decisions must be instant. 4 seconds. That's all. On the destroyer's deck, the close-in weapons systems, the CIWS, wake up. Their radar heads swivel like angry eyes. And then the sound begins. A ripping, mechanical roar as the phalanx guns spin up and start firing. It doesn't sound like a gun. It sounds like a circular saw cutting through metal, multiplied by thunder. Tracers stitch the air. The sea around the drones erupts as rounds smack water. One drone catches a burst and disintegrates into fragments that vanish into the black. Another wobbles, still coming. Engaging! 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 The voice on the net is steady, but everyone can hear the edge. You're on the deck now, imagine it. The ship shudders with each burst. The air smells like cordite and salt. Your mouth tastes like adrenaline. A drone slips through the first tracer arc, then another. This is the moment Iran wanted. The moment where a cheap machine gets close enough for the camera. But then the second layer hits. Rolling airframe missiles, RAM, launch in quick snaps like angry fingers pointing. 2 drones vanish, then 3. A 4th drone, still alive, dives toward the carrier's general direction, maybe not even guided anymore, just falling with intent. And that's when the US unleashes the terrifying thing. Not a missile, a silence. Because suddenly, the drone's engine tone changes, then cuts. Its lights flicker, it tips sideways, and it falls into the sea like a dead bird. No explosion, no heroic interception, just dropped. Now multiply that across the swarm. One by one, clusters begin to lose coherence. Drones drift off course. Some circle aimlessly. Some simply plunge. What you're seeing is not just air defense. It's electronic warfare. A coordinated attack on the swarm's nervous system, jamming control links, spoofing GPS, corrupting the guidance solution. And the terrifying part isn't that it works on one drone. It's that it works on dozens at once. Iran launched 300 drones expecting to overwhelm weapons. Instead, the US attacks the swarm's brain. This is the hunt metaphor. The predator doesn't chase every insect, it finds the hive, it poisons the signal. Now shift perspective, enemy view. In that command node inland, operators watch their screens with growing confusion. Dots that should be arrow straight begin to smear, wobble, vanish. Telemetry drops, video feeds freeze. The swarm that looked like a storm now looks like a glitch. They start shouting, "Link lost! Navigation error! Multiple units non-responsive!" And then the most humiliating thing possible happens. Some drones turn around. Not because they're returning home, because they're lost. Imagine the panic in that room. Imagine the political pressure. Imagine the commander who promised a viral moment now staring at a collapsing operation. Could you make that call? Abort? When your leaders are expecting victory? Because that's the human factor that technology doesn't erase. Even in drone war, someone's career, someone's life, someone's family is on the line. But the operation can't be recalled in time. The drones are already committed. So Iran does what pressured commanders do. They double down. A second wave is pushed harder. Higher speed, more direct, less subtle. They try to brute force the last miles before the network can dismantle them. And that is exactly what the strike group wants, because now the swarm is no longer a mystery. It's a target set. Minute 18. The strike group has destroyed or neutralized the majority, but enough remain, maybe 70 to 90, that a few could still slip through by sheer chance. And chance is unacceptable when you're protecting a carrier. This is where discipline matters. Training, rehearsal, the ability to execute under stress. The ships rotate firing sectors to manage heat and magazine limits. Fighters cycle back for fuel while new jets replace them. The Hawkeye stays on station, feeding the picture like oxygen. And the US begins doing something that feels cold when you hear it described. They stop reacting to drones individually and start managing them statistically. They assign priorities. They compute intercept probabilities. They conserve expensive shots for high-confidence threats. This is modern defense. Math wrapped in steel. Minute 20. Another 30 drones are shredded by layered fire. Minute 23. The sea skimming group is reduced to single digits. Minute 26. The last coherent cluster breaks apart under jamming and intercept. A drone finally gets close enough that everyone holds their breath, one of the few that made it through the layers by being small, low, and lucky. It dives toward the carrier's side. For a half second, it looks like Iran gets its moment. Then a final CIWS burst rips it apart 200 meters out. The fragments hit the water with pathetic little splashes. Not a strike, not a headline, just debris. And in the CIC, the running count stabilizes. 300 launched. By minute 30, the air picture is nearly clean, but the story isn't over, because defense is only half the message. The other half is what the US chooses to do next. Here's the pivot point. You can intercept 300 drones and call it a day, or you can make sure the next 300 never launch. That's escalation logic, deterrence logic, denial. And in this fictional scenario, the authorization comes not as a dramatic speech, but as a clipped order transmitted through secure channels. Permission granted, counterstrike approved. And the terrifying thing unleashed now is not a single platform. It's multi-domain coordination, the kind of synchronized response that makes adversaries realize they're not fighting a country, but a machine built for war. First, submarines. An attack submarine already in theater receives target packages, coastal drone launch sites, command nodes, and radar facilities supporting the operation. Tomahawk cruise missiles are prepared, quietly, patiently. Then, the surface fleet. Destroyers and cruisers load their vertical launch cells. More Tomahawks, maritime strike missiles, defensive interceptors. The carrier's air wing begins generating sorties with a different mission profile. Not defense, punishment. F/A-18S and F-35CS are configured for strike, carrying standoff weapons, JSOWs, JDAMs, anti-radiation missiles to hunt radar. Electronic Attack Aircraft, EA-18G Growlers, prepare to smother air defenses and communications. And overhead, far beyond what the enemy can see, U.S. intelligence assets map the battlefield in near real time. This is information dominance again. While Iran believed it was creating chaos, the U.S. was building a target list, a calculated hunt. Minute 42 from the first detection, less time than your average commute, the first counterstrike arrives. Tomahawks pop out of the sea and fly low, terrain hugging, their engines whispering death. They don't roar, they don't announce, they simply appear on radar, too late. The first impacts hit drone launch infrastructure, warehouses, fuel depots, control trailers, antenna farms, not cities, not civilians. The strike is framed as a capability removal, systematic, surgical. Then the air wing arrives. From the enemy's view, the night is suddenly full of invisible attackers. Radar sites that switch on to see get punished for speaking. Anti-radiation missiles home on emissions like predators smelling blood. A command node loses power. A backup generator kicks in, then dies in a second strike. Communications fall into confusion. And this is where the terrifying becomes clear. Because the U.S. isn't just destroying drones, it's erasing the ecosystem that produces them. Factories, storage, launch rails, data links, command rooms, radar. One by one, pieces disappear. A technological purge. The message is simple. You can build swarms, but we can remove your ability to build swarms. Now, ask yourself, could you be the commander in that command node, listening to your network collapse, knowing you started this? Because that's the psychological weight of a counterstrike that's designed not to retaliate, but to instruct. By the time the sun hints at the horizon, the operation is over, and the aftermath doesn't look like the movies. The carrier is still afloat, no flames, no dramatic wounded ship listing to one side. The deck is wet and scarred in small places from close defense, spent casings, scorched paint near a gun mount, the smell of burned propellant. Sailors move with the drained focus of people who just lived through something their families will never fully understand. Somewhere below decks, someone finally drinks cold coffee. Somewhere in a bunk, someone stares at the ceiling, heart still sprinting. Now, the final tally, told as a timeline, because this is how professionals understand chaos. Minute 0 to 4. Early warning confirmed. Cap vectored. First intercepts begin. Minute 5 to 12. Long-range Aegis engagements. Fighter kills. Swarm splits high/low. Minute 12 to 20. Close-in defenses activate. CIWS and RAM shred sea skimmers. Jamming collapses multiple clusters. Minute 21 to 30. Remaining drones neutralized. Final near miss destroyed short of the carrier. Minute 31 to 42. Counterstrike authorized and executed. Launch infrastructure and command chain targeted. Minute 43. Region receives the message. 300 drones launched. The vast majority never reach weapons effect range. A handful get close enough to scare people. None achieve the strategic image Iran wanted. And that's the cold truth of modern war. You can spend months building a swarm and lose it in under an hour, less time than a lunch break. So what does this fictional scenario reveal? First, saturation attacks are real and they're not going away. Cheap drones are attractive because they force expensive defenses to spend money and attention. Second, layered defense isn't about one magic system, it's about integration. Fighters, Aegis, missiles, electronic warfare, close-in guns, and the decision-making discipline to allocate shots under pressure. Third, and most importantly, The terrifying something isn't a secret weapon. It's the ability to turn the battle space into a hunt, to see first, to decide faster, to make the enemy's plan fall apart before it reaches the last mile. And here's the thought that should stick with you. If 300 drones can be neutralized when a force is prepared, what happens when a force isn't? What happens to a port, a city, a base, a convoy that doesn't have a layered network, doesn't have the sensors, the jammers, the training? That's where the future of warfare is headed. So let me ask you, which moment in this scenario was the real turning point? The first detection, the jamming collapse, or the decision to strike the launch chain? Debate it below. Hit subscribe for in-depth military breakdowns.